Hi everyone, this is Tim Brown, and today I want to talk about IGTV. I recently read an article that Instagram is thinking about making IGTV more flexible in terms of the formatting of your videos, so you don't have to always use vertical videos. I think this is a pretty significant development, mainly because people just have a hard time transferring their YouTube video, which is in a horizontal format, to Instagram, thereby getting the most out of their footage. People just simply aren't going to take the time to create two different sets of footage and then apply them to different formats. However, I do believe that Instagram did have it correct and that IGTV was created because people do tend to use video vertically. People tend to use their phones vertically. People take pictures vertically. People shoot video vertically. But the horizontal video format, especially the way it's being used on YouTube, is still pretty much the standard, and people aren't going to switch, at least not right away. So if you want to get the most out of IGTV, you're going to have to give your video recordings or your projects or whatever it is you're working on for IGTV a little bit more forethought in terms of how you actually structure the information. It's not very complicated, it just requires a little bit of forethought. So for example, when you're shooting your footage, it helps to take into consideration the tripartite composition or the grid that comes built into your camera and use that grid to structure your composition. So for example, here's an example of what that grid could look like, especially arranged in thirds. Think about arranging your footage in thirds. This is what it looks like if you were actually using your phone. So the grid is actually built in. If you don't see it, you should be able to add this through the settings on your phone. Now here's an example of how the thirds can be used to structure your content when you have the thumbnails along the bottom. So as you can see here, the thumbnails actually take up pretty much the bottom third of the composition. So when you're using the standard footage that you've already created, say for YouTube, you can just simply take that same footage and add it to the second third or the center realm of your composition. That way you're not really reinventing the wheel. And that way, when people are browsing through your vertical IGTV videos, you can have your thumbnails along the bottom, you can have your video footage, your standard widescreen video footage in the middle third, and then maybe put some text along the top third. Or what you could do is just take your video footage and enlarge it a little bit so that it occupies actually the top 2/3 of the composition with the thumbnails along the bottom. And once they take an interest in your video and they remove the thumbnails, then you can share with them some secondary information. And once again, here's an example of how the video footage could then occupy the top 2/3 and then my referenced image down below. And here are some other examples that I've used in the past where I've actually used my product reviews where I put the product along the top. And this is what it looks without the thumbnails along the bottom. So you have some flexibility, and it's not like you have to follow these formats rigidly. But when you think about the composition in thirds, especially when using IGTV vertical video format, this is something that I think that is important to consider, even if you're doing it in a more subliminal way. Now, some things to think about too when you are recording video for, say, a smaller phone. So, for example, this is a screenshot of an iPhone 5S. And what you notice here is that the thumbnails no longer occupy the bottom third. They actually occupy the bottom half of your phone screen. So you want to obviously give a lot of thought to how you want to do that if you're still using one of the smaller phones. In this case, the video footage could pretty much occupy the upper half of your composition, although you can still use the thirds as a way to structure your image. Just keep in mind that the thumbnails are much larger. They occupy a larger real estate of the screen image. And here's an example of how the thirds can be used to structure your composition if you happen to be using a smaller image. Now, one thing you can consider doing is also creating your own templates. If you create your own template, then that way you can have the leeway to structure your composition however you want. So in this case, I created a grid in which I could it's pretty much like placeholders, but I would use this as an overlay on my video editor. And that way I can arrange content the way I want. And you can use any application to do this. You can use an app, say like Pixelmator, which is what you're seeing here, which is what I use to set up my grid to begin with. Now there are some apps out there, some of which or most of which are really just set up for stories. But since stories pretty much is the same vertical format as IGTV, some of these templates could come in handy. especially some that actually allow you to import video into the templates in the case of this application called Unfold. It's one of the better applications out there, and it comes with a ton of templates, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, I think it's also worthwhile too to consider some of the resources that you actually have at your disposal. There may be other apps that you're using, or say Keynote, which comes on your Mac as well as on your phone. Keynote can be resized to any format that you want. So you can set a Keynote presentation up as a 9:16 aspect ratio, and then take advantage of the beautiful templates that come with Keynote. All in all, I think that IGTV is still a pretty cool format. I think that it is natural for people to hold their phone vertically. And for some people, it's even natural to film footage vertically. But if you're one of those people who have a big brand and most of your footage is being recorded horizontally, and you just simply want to just transfer that image over to the vertical format without having to reinvent the wheel, consider a little bit more forethought in how you can take full advantage of the screen real estate when shooting vertically. So those are my suggestions for shooting video footage for IGTV. You can also check me out at myApplePodcast.com, which is my original address and the original title of this podcast. I will also feature some screenshots and some templates that you can download on that site. Thanks for tuning in, and check me out next time.